So I saw this on BlueSky, and it looks like it created some kind of discourse. So we have here from Julie Ray Goldstein saying on a recent podcast, Gavin Newsom, so this is the governor of California in the US, who is potentially going to be the next contender to Donald Trump's third term or whatever. He's possibly going to be fielded as the main Democratic nomination for president. On a recent podcast, he tells Sean Ryan, I don't know who the fuck that is, how trans sports issue opened the door for him to change his mind on trans healthcare for kids. He now opposes. As someone who adored him since 2004 and voted for him 5 times, I can't wait for him to leave office. There's no way I'll be voting for him a 6th time. So, I thought we could just see what he says here.
All this was sort of, I think, post-George Floyd, post-COVID, we kind of came out. And there was obviously this rights movement post-George Floyd, which you got to understand, I mean, on the basis of what occurred and all the social unrest. And there was a natural inclination then to try to course correct. But it was across the spectrum of issues, including increasingly on the issues of how we talk, communicate, how politically correct and sensitive people started becoming, use of language, pronouns, and then issues around the trans community and this notion of gender affirming care for children. That's tough, man. And the science on that, I haven't dove that deep into it, but I read.
Yeah, I didn't think you had actually, mate, because anyone who has any opposition to trans healthcare for trans children is opposing the expert opinion, and they have no rational basis to do so.
One report, and then there's one that's slightly contradictory, and then they said, there's no contradictory. Here's what the UK just came out with. You're full of shit. It's absolutely scientifically sound that it's outrageous, and so it's intense. And then I meet with families, literally meet with families, save my child's life.
Right, okay, so on one hand, we have the UK coming out with a, internationally planned, terrible, non-peer-reviewed report which disagrees with all of the expert opinion and advice. And on the other hand, we have him meeting actual trans children who are like, this saved my life. And so, it's so difficult. Oh, what can we possibly say? It's such a difficult situation.
And they're thriving.
It's just, you can't serve the country until you're 18. You can't buy a gun. You can't buy a kid.
Okay. Is serving the country or buying a gun healthcare? No, so it's a stupid argument. Fucking brain dead argument that a child should be able to see through.
Alcohol until you're 21, and to make that big of a decision is a...
It's not a decision, it's healthcare. It's like, oh, well, you can't drive a car until you're 18, so that means you can't actually have your appendix out until you're 18 because it's a big decision.
Totally get it.
Kid, you could also be destroying a lot of lives as well.
Yeah, apart from factually, for a fact, you are not. There's no evidence for that at all. You've completely made that up. They've been doing healthcare for trans kids for over 30 years, and that just factually is not the case. There are people who transitioned as children who are older than me. We have the evidence for this already.
Well, their brain is...
This guy's a fucking prick.
Fully developed.
You got, until 26 plus, yeah, so it's even further with the brain.
Yeah, you just got to ban... Yeah, it's completely arbitrary number of 26. Yeah, it's just apparently when your brain just stops developing. Of course, it's not true at all. It's just a thing that transphobes say, but whatever, just blindly repeat it without looking into this at all.
Look, I come to this very much more open-minded than I've ever been. More receptive, because a lot of
more receptive to anti-trans arguments.
The pushback came from folks, candidly, that I didn't respect, that never respected the gay community.
Yeah, exactly. The people who hate trans kids and want to take away their healthcare are also the people who hate gay people. Good observation. And now what, you're more open-minded to them because you're stupid? You think this is politically more expedient for you?
Period. There are people who are opposed to just basic rights that have been going after. So I think the natural inclination was sort of dismiss.
Yeah, that's a good inclination. It makes sense, but also if you look into it further, it's rationally justified.
And now I recognize more fully and deeply. And I think the sports issue really opened that door for me.
I mean, it's good to see them say it out loud that they get radicalized hating on trans people in sports because they don't look into it and it's like a gut reaction, and then they start listening to all of these homophobic, misogynistic, racist people who say that people shouldn't have human rights. So, like, he's literally just saying this out loud. He's saying, I didn't want to interact with these people because they hated gay people and I knew that was bad. But then they were all talking about sports and I didn't look into it properly, and my gut reaction says trans people shouldn't be allowed to do PE at school. So now I think maybe they have a point. Maybe you do have to hand it to the Nazis.
The nuances in the space. That said, I'll take a backseat to no one in terms of anti-discrimination laws against the community.
Yeah, well, good luck with managing banning trans healthcare and banning discrimination against trans people.
That's where I take a backseat to no one. And I've signed some of the most progressive legislation on that, and I'm proud of that. That's who I am. Stand up for ideals and strike out against injustice. And I think it's unjust to attack vulnerable communities and discriminate against people. That said, on the issue of children, this is a tough issue.
He's wrong. It's not a tough issue. They could just look at what the experts are saying. However, what he does say on discrimination there is good. And for him to just say his thought process out loud is good. And he comes across as a human way more than Keir Starmer ever does. Which is a comparison I'm going to make between the two shortly. But anyway, this was the clip. So Julie has said, based on this, she is not going to vote for him. Okay, I think fair enough. That is, she obviously thought, I think that when your expectations are as low for politicians as mine is, what he just said there comes across as barely even evil at all. Like, compared to what the Labour Party is doing in the UK, that would be incredible if we just had someone who was like ready to hear both sides on trans healthcare from both the people who hate trans people and like experts. We're a million miles away from that in the UK. But also, it does feel a little bit more like they're just a couple of years behind where we are, and this is the kind of rubbish that the Labour Party was saying a few years ago, and now look where we are. Doesn't mean it'll happen the same way. Anyway, this wasn't actually quite what I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about was Parker Malloy here, who is great, and you should definitely follow on all the things, said, I will never, ever vote for Gavin Newsom. Ever, under any circumstances. I don't care if he becomes a Dem nominee, he's still not getting my vote.
On the basis of what?
So I saw this thing.
And all the social unrest.
Shut up. BlueSky is so annoying with how it does the autoplay. Anyway, and I thought, when I see people say this, I think maybe 10 years ago, I would have been like, oh, but this... Also, bearing in mind the political landscape was different 10 years ago, I would have, because it was 2015, before Trump and before Brexit, I would have thought, well, you've got to vote for the lesser of two evils, right? But now when I see this, I think, well, fair enough. I think that's a fair position. But then Parker was pointing out that the replies were quite hostile to this take. This thinking is why we lose. Loads of them are blocked. I absolutely hate how BlueSky blocks me from seeing what was said just because someone else has blocked this person. I just think it's the single worst feature about the website. It's fucking terrible. It just ruins... Like, what use is this? Deranged reply, we can't even see it. Terrible. Not blaming Parker. This is entirely the fault of BlueSky, and it's a terrible, terrible feature. Anyway, I did see loads of negative replies here, which we can probably no longer look at. Basically saying, people like you are the reason that the Democrats keep losing. And I think that argument is absolutely terrible. I can totally understand someone saying, like, here is a moral dilemma. Do you want to vote for the second worst person on earth or the worst person on earth? It's quite an easy, like, in this isolated hypothetical situation for like philosophy undergrads or whatever, that's quite an easy philosophical discussion. Like, yeah, if that was the only choice and the only situation and the only thing on the table, then voting for the lesser of two evils makes sense. Absolutely. But I don't think this "you're the reason why we lose" thing is them saying that. I think if someone replied saying, I think we should vote for the lesser of two evils, and that's why I will be voting for the lesser of two evils, that's also like a fair position. If someone comes to me with that argument, if someone tells me they voted for Keir Starmer in the last election and they will be voting for him in the next one, not because they support any of his policies, but because they're voting for the lesser of two evils, I might say, well, I disagree with your reasoning and here's why, which I'm about to go into. But I don't think this person is my enemy. You are the reason why we're losing, whatever. In the same way that I think so many people come at the take of, I'm not going to vote for this person, do seem to think that. I don't think this is just completely the wrong way to look at this situation. So I wrote about this. Sorry, we're just going to read out one of my BlueSky posts and go into it further. I've said, the people who are annoyed at LGBT people saying they'd never vote for Gavin Newsom or Keir Starmer are so ridiculous. They accuse us of being the reason why the centre-left is losing, whilst actively opposing those trying to hold their guy to account, encouraging them to pursue worse policies. Vote for my guy, even if he's evil, is the reason why you are losing. Decades of that has allowed your guy to be so cartoonishly evil that literally... This is, I think, more true for Keir Starmer, by the way, but maybe you also think that's true for Gavin Newsom. Didn't quite come across in the last interview, in my opinion, as him being as bad as Keir Starmer, who is actually terrible. Anyway, that literally the only positive attribute is that they aren't as bad as the other guy. I think maybe this is more true for like Kamala Harris, whose main feature seemed to be that she wasn't Donald Trump. Anyway, if you had been pushing back the whole time, maybe that wouldn't be the case. When you give them blind allegiance and a guaranteed vote, what pressures exist on them to change their policies other than money from billionaires? It's very clear that the Democrats and Labour's base hates the direction they're travelling in. But they continue to get worse because they think you'll still vote for them and that it's big money pulling them. You might think that it's a simple harm reduction calculation, but it isn't. Voting for them again will encourage them to get even worse. And then even more people will be harmed by them, and people will just stop voting altogether. Of course, I know that if the Republicans or Reform get in the next election, it will be even worse for everyone, particularly for people like me, actually. And it usually happens that those being annoyed by people not being able to vote for their guy are the least affected. Fundamentally, their political strategy is wrong. Voting tactically for short-term harm reduction, important to point out harm reduction here, not like voting for an actual positive policy, whilst guaranteeing long-term suffering is not a good strategy, as we can see playing out right now. Even more ridiculous is relying on people, like as a strategy, relying on people you're actively harming on voting for you on the grounds that someone else might harm them or other people more. That is so stupid. You have to give people something to vote for. Right, okay. So what I'm saying is, like, take a step back for a minute and stop looking at this in the individual level and look at this at the population level. Your guy is losing. You think, this is terrible. We're getting the worst. We're going to get Nigel Farage. We're going to get a third Trump term. Why does our guy keep losing? Who is to blame? If you then look and there are loads of people, a whole population of people, this is what you've got to look at it, at population levels. There is a group of people who traditionally have been centre-left voters who are no longer voting at all. And when asked, they say the party has moved too far right for me to vote. If your response is to be angry at them, effectively saying, my political strategy relies on these people whose policies, who do not agree with the policies I'm putting forward on voting for me, then your political strategy is stupid. Why are you relying on people who you're not catering for on voting for you? You're saying the political system is so bad that they are trapped into voting for me, and if they don't, I'm angry about it. Like, that's a garbage position. It's stupid. Like, realistically, you can go up to someone and be like, why didn't you vote for the lesser of two evils? But they might not even see it that way. They might, like, I think there are a lot of trans people and disabled people who might look at the current situation in the UK and be like, well, this current government is actually worse than the last one. How much worse can reform be? Maybe even reform will be better. I actually think reform will be worse than this current Labour government, if you can believe it. I actually definitely think that another Trump term will be worse than whatever the Democrats can cook up. But some people might not think that. And I think there are a lot of people who aren't necessarily trans people or disabled people or other minority groups who are directly affected by terrible human rights choices who might actually think, like, the Conservatives were terrible, Labour are even worse, so maybe I'll give reform a chance. Like, there'll be people who aren't plugged in, they aren't as politically aware, they don't really know what's going on, and that's a lot of the voters. So how can you, like, it's okay to be annoyed that some people don't know what's going on, people voting for stupid things, and a general frustration I share with you. But if your anger is being taken out on people who are saying, look, this political party has moved so far right that I feel like I'm voting, it's like, you know, turkeys voting for the chop at Christmas or whatever the saying is. Like, this is what I feel like with Labour. I don't think I could vote Labour, even tactically, just on a moral ground for how terrible they are for LGBT rights. Like, how could I, if today's Labour Party was rebranded and put as an option in like 2010 or whatever it was when David Cameron got voted in, like, they are extremely way worse for LGBT rights. And I would genuinely vote David Cameron over Keir Starmer on LGBT rights because he just objectively was better, even though he was a fucking terrible and was very, like, a right-wing knobhead who ended us in Brexit. And I didn't vote for them, and I never would, and I've never voted Tory, and I never would. But I think you can't expect people to, like, listen to the you should vote for the lesser of two evils when, particularly when you aren't being affected by something that they are, and it just is so terrible what they're facing. And, like, this is also true for people who are focusing on things like the genocide in Gaza. Like, it was pretty clear that Kamala Harris was gonna carry on with that, do nothing about it. And, like, at what point does the lesser of two evils argument just break down? Like, when you're supporting a genocide? Like, oh, we're doing a bit less genocide? You just can't. I don't know. But importantly, what the point I'm making here is, I think it's a rubbish political strategy and it's a waste of your anger. Why isn't your anger placed at the people making the decisions, the people with the power, who are saying, well, our strategy relies on people who we hate voting for us. Our strategy relies on publicly and loudly causing harm to minority groups that we feel are so trapped in the current political situation they have no other options. Like, you don't think you should be using your anger on them? They're the reason that's losing. Like, the reason we end up in this situation is when you have a lesser of two evils situations and all these people, like, on the... Wait, which way's left for you? All the people further left have no, like, realistic option. Like, in the US, you literally have no other option. In the UK, we have no, like, other winnable option, or didn't in previous elections, though we might do in the future with the Green Party. If we keep having that situation, the people making the decisions will just think, oh, well, we're always going to win that vote, so we don't need to chase that vote, so we don't need to do any policies that benefit these people at all. In fact, we can do things that harm them because they're still going to vote for us. And that will just keep happening, and they'll just keep shuffling and shuffling because they're going to want to eat the centre voters who don't always want to vote for them. So constantly voting for the lesser of the two evils actually causes these parties to get worse. But now, the other point, which I want to highlight here, which I didn't point out, is if you tell someone you're going to vote for them regardless of what they do, you have absolutely no bargaining power at all. You're not taking part in the democratic process. Like, you are voting, which is taking part in it. But that's not the only duty of someone who lives in a democracy, is to just vote once every 4 years and then that's it. You need to get the politicians to work for you. Like, that's literally the whole purpose of democracy, is we're voting in people who are meant to work for us. That isn't the reality of it, but like that's the goal, that's the intention. And if you just tell them, oh yeah, well, whatever you do, I'll just vote for you, but then what? You cannot be mad when they do something you don't like. Whereas if you tell them, look, I hate the other guy so much that I really want to vote for you anyway, but actually I'm not going to if you harm trans people, if you support genocides, if you sign disabled people's death warrants or whatever. Like, if you harm these people, I am just not going to vote for you. Then they will look at their polling numbers and they'll be like, shit, we actually were relying on we were relying on the LGBT vote, which is a huge block of people, by the way. We were relying on the disabled people's vote. We were relying on human rights activists' votes, because we've always had them for the last 50 years worth of elections, and shit, we've lost all of them. They will panic and they will be like, we have to win these people back. And then they will try and first just do some virtue signaling bullshit where they're just like, oh, we support equality or something. And when that doesn't work because you say, no, I'm not going to vote for you unless you roll back these attacks on human rights and stop building weapons or whatever and arresting people on the street for protesting, then they might do something. So if you're going around telling people, if you're going around telling people, oh, if you say you're not going to vote for this person, then you're the reason we're losing. What are you talking about? Those people are trying to actively use their bargaining power and exercise their power in a democracy to affect change. And you are not. You are saying, I don't care what happens politically as long as it's not the other guy. You're just doing a team sports rubbish thing. And yeah, maybe you could say, oh, it's harm reduction, but the current Labour government is worse than the previous Conservative government for a lot of people. So was it even harm reduction to vote for them? It doesn't seem to have turned out that way. And that's because they're chasing the right-wing voters and they're not chasing the left-wing voters because they think they can always get the left-wing vote. So I just really think it's it's not just, if you tell me you're doing, as I said earlier, if you tell me you're doing a harm reduction vote and that's why you're voting for Labour or that's why you're voting for the Democrats or something, I don't think you're my enemy, but I think you're wrong. And I don't just think you're wrong in a oh, well, that's not correct, but do what you want. I think that you are encouraging the state of affairs that we have, and that I don't think that's good. And if you're complaining about people who are trying to change it, you're part of the problem. Just fuck off, basically. So I the next election you have, I think you should vote. I don't quite know how it works in the US. In the UK, we often have multiple parties, and some of them are seen as protest votes because they'll never win anyway. I think even that is better than not voting. And also in the UK, if all of the parties are terrible, you can spoil your ballot, which is where you just scribble on it or write fuck off or something. And it doesn't count as a vote, but it still is tallied up. And it still says, it still expresses discontent. And obviously if you had an election and there was half of the people who went to vote spoiled their ballots, then that would say something pretty strongly to all of the people who are making the strategies for the political parties. So I think you should turn up and do something. I don't know what the equivalents are in the US. I know that you had a third party candidate this time who was just rubbish and maybe just a gateway to the right wing. But It's just something, but you have to affect change somehow. And if you can write letters to your MPs, you can you join a union, you can go to protests, as long as you don't hold the wrong sign and get arrested for it in the UK. But one of the things you can do to change things in democracy is to threaten to withhold your vote from the party who might listen to you if you do that.